morning and welcome back, Formula One fans. It is Sunday morning, it's 7 a.m. and we are getting ready for the start of the final Grand Prix of the 2022 season. This, of course, is the last Grand Prix for Sebastian Vettel, and then we've got Nicholas Latifi and Mick Schumacher and Danny Ricciardo, who do not have rides for next year, although, as I mentioned earlier, it looks like Ricciardo at least has got himself in the position of being a backup driver for Red Bull. Of course, the backup driver not only fills in occasionally in races or in practice, but he's used a lot on the simulators for helping develop the cars off-season and into the season as well. And as I mentioned, Red Bull have the luxury of not having to pay him. So they're in the formation lap. As I mentioned yesterday, we've got Red Bull up front in 1 and 2, and then we've got Ferrari in 3 and 4, and we have Mercedes in 5 and 6, followed by Lando Norris in the 7th position. Taking up the bottom of the field are all of the normal suspects. Nicholas Latifi is not starting dead last. He's second from dead last. I don't know what happened, but Valtteri Bottas is dead last, and Ricciardo, who qualified 10th, is now starting in 13th place. He got a 3-grid penalty for some infraction that I haven't been able to pick up on, but as the race goes on, if we're able to pick up on that, then we'll certainly bring that to you. So they're forming up for the start, and we'll be getting going in just about, I would think, 1 to 1.5 minutes. And the red light countdown is on, and it's 3, 4, 5, and lights out, and they are off. And Sergio Perez has got off to a really good start. In fact, he might take Max Verstappen here and going into the first corner. No, he doesn't. George Russell does not get a good start. He's dropped back. And Lewis Hamilton, he's always fighting with somebody at the start of this race, and it looks like he's fighting with Carlos Sainz, and he went off the track and then he cut across and actually took a position away from Carlos Sainz. I'm sure at some point he'll have to give that back because you're not allowed to do that. But it's strange that, in fact, they've just come on the radio and said, you know, that's the same thing that he did to Max Verstappen last year. But anyway, they're going, and we've got a pretty easy start, other than the little thing there with Hamilton and Sainz, and then the rest of the field is kind of falling in behind. Lando Norris, of course, has made up a couple of positions, and George Russell has dropped back. But I don't expect that to last very long. Sometimes going into the first corner, as we found out, you can get knocked out, or you can lose positions, and you can gain positions. So it's a long race. It's 58 laps. The track is about 3.2 miles long, and it's going to take them about 1 minute and 30 seconds on average. Sometimes they'll get down to the 128 and 29s, and sometimes they'll be in the 130, 131, 132. So let's just watch here as it goes off. Max Verstappen now, as we come to the end of the first lap, has opened up about a 1 second lead on his teammate Sergio Perez. So as we're coming up into lap 9 now, in fact, Hamilton did give back the position to Carlos Sainz. So right now we're right at where we started the race, where we've got the Red Bulls, the Ferraris, and the Mercedes following on, and so that's the top 6 places. At the bottom end. Bottas has moved up 3-4 places. Latifi is exactly where he was at the beginning of the race, and Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen now have dropped back there. It's interesting that that they decided to get rid of Mick Schumacher, and we talked about that a lot yesterday or Wednesday, whatever day it was. I think it was yesterday during qualifying. But you know, he's consistently placed, especially in qualifying, better than Magnussen, and he's had better races per se when he's managed to get to the end. It's just that he keeps wrecking the cars. So I think they thought the cost of having him was just too much. So right now it's settled in. Verstappen's got about a 2.25 second lead on his teammate Perez, and Perez has about a 2 3/4, nearly 3-second lead on Charles Leclerc. Remember, if it ends this way, then Perez takes second place in the World Championship. If somehow Leclerc gets past him, then Leclerc takes second place in the championship. And in this race, it's very interesting. Everybody is on the hard tires, which is strange for this part of the world. The temperatures are cool right now in Abu Dhabi. The start of the race, it was 82 degrees. You know, and having been in that part of the world quite a lot, it's a very hot part of the world. So it's kind of interesting that that they've all gone to the hard tires, because you normally do that when the track is a cold track, because they last better than the soft or the intermediate tires. So probably most people are on a one-stop strategy, maybe some of them on two-stop, but starting on the hards, they would obviously go to a hard on the stop. So I would just look for a one-stop race for most of these drivers. So coming up on lap 15, and it looks like Lewis Hamilton the last couple of laps has been having issues with his car, because his teammate George Russell now has moved up into the 5th position, and Hamilton is complaining about some issues. Somebody says, "I just don't have any power," and that's you know, that's not like a Mercedes car, because just looking at them early on here, the Mercedes have really been flying. In fact, all the top 6 have really been flying. And right now, the only change in the top 6 is that Russell has passed his teammate Lewis Hamilton to take over the 5th place. At the bottom end, our good friend for Alfa Romeo has moved up into 16th place now, and of course I'm talking about the guy that used to drive for Mercedes, and whose name in the last 30 seconds has just totally escaped me, but it will come back. And at the bottom end, we've got Mick Schumacher, we've got of course Nicholas Latifi, Kevin Magnussen's moved up 1 place, and now we're down again with Latifi all the way at the bottom. So not a lot of movement going on these last few laps, other than the car of George Russell passing his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Okay, so of course I was talking about Valtteri Bottas. Now that he's just come in and gone off on the screen. And he's moved up now to 15th position, so he's kind of doing what we thought he would. Danny Ricciardo has dropped back a couple of positions from where he started, but what we are seeing now is some of the lower end cars, they must be on 2-pit strategy, because we're seeing them now come in. We're in about lap 22, 23, and we're seeing them come into the pits for tires, which not normally on soft tires, then you come in around lap 22 to 24. So it's really interesting to see some of them coming in early on these hard compound tires, which must mean that they're scrubbing faster than everybody thought. So is this going to mean that the top guys will be on a 2-stop strategy? Or they're going to be able to maintain their tires better, because then once you get out in front into clean air, it's a lot easier on your tires than it is for the guys that are back in the middle that are always fighting for position, because they're braking more. The steering takes a lot more hit as they try to overtake into the turns and things like that. So they get caught up in the dirty air of the car in front of them. So it's a lot harder on their tires. So maybe we're seeing the lower end guys on a 2-stop, and the upper drivers and the top 5 or 6 that are on a 1-stop. So it's going to be interesting to see. Right now, though, there's not a lot going on in this race. It's kind of it's what we term inline racing, which, you know, can get pretty boring, especially when there's not a lot going on in the lower end or the middle of the race, where you normally see a lot of passing and overtaking and things like that. So, but anyway, it's early. We're like I said, we've still got a good, out of the 58 laps, so we've still got a good 35 laps to go. So we're not even halfway through yet, so it's going to be interesting to see as we move along here what is going to happen on these tires. Okay, so it looks like that Red Bull is putting Sergio Perez at least on a two-stop strategy, because he has just come into the pits and actually just gone out, actually I should say, just gone out of the pits and taken on a new set of hard compounds. So with that strategy in mind, it would appear that around lap 35 to 38, maybe just a little later than that, he's going to come in for another set of tires. Now, if Leclerc stays out and does not come in, does not have a two-pit strategy, then it's going to be very difficult at the end of this race for Sergio Perez to catch Charles Leclerc, because remember, it takes about 20 to 22 seconds to get down into come off the track, get into the pits, get the tires changed and get out again. You lose about 22 seconds. So 22 seconds back, even with, if he did it and he's got 20, let's say 18, 20, 22 laps to go, that would mean making up a second a lap, which is not impossible, but that would be a very difficult task to take on. Unless, of course, Leclerc's on the two-stop strategy as well, and then this should put Perez in a pretty good position as we go forward. But now we're starting to see here some of the other drivers coming in for the pit stops as well. So it looks like a lot of these guys are going to be on a two-pit stop strategy. Remember, on these cars, it's amazing to watch. There's actually 14, 15, it takes 15 guys to change 4 tires. And then it takes them exactly, I say exactly, the average is about 2.5 seconds. So 15 guys, the car comes to a stop, they jack up the front and rear, they pull off a wheel, so they under the lug nut, they pull off a wheel, they put it back on the wheel, and they do up the lug nut, all in 2.5 seconds. It's amazing to watch, and if you get a chance and you really want to see it live and in action, try and get yourself to one of the races to watch it, because it is really a joy to watch the tire changing going on. Okay, so all of the top 6 cars now are coming in for tire changes, with the exception of Perez. Of course, he's already done that, and we're at lap. It looks like lap 20. It looks like we're in the 20s. Which is really strange, because this is really early to be changing out hard tires, and some of these guys are going onto the medium compound tires. So it would be very strange to me that they're doing this without thinking about a two-stop strategy. So right now, Sergio Perez is the only one that's in the top 6 that's on the hard compound tires. Everybody else is on the medium compound tires, and all the guys in the midfield and on back, they're also on hard compound tires. So a really interesting strategy here by these teams in going to the medium compound. I think they must believe that these medium tires, or at least some of them believe these medium tires can make it to the end, which would mean, you know, they're going to be putting on 30, 32, 33 laps maybe on these tires, which would be a lot of laps on these tires, even with these lower temperatures. But we'll wait and see how things go. So where are we on? We're on lap 25, 26 here, and the order is pretty much back. We've got the 2 Red Bulls out front, followed by the 2 Ferraris, followed by George Russell in the Mercedes, and then Sebastian Vettel in an Aston Martin. So Sebastian Vettel, of course, he has not stopped for tires. It looks like his team has him on a one-stop strategy, and in fact, he's just come on the radio and asked, because Lance Stroll, who is his teammate, is on obviously a two-stop strategy now, and so Vettel just asked, you know, why am I on a one-stop and he's on a two-stop? And of course, they believe, of course, that that he's going to make up all that time by staying out there on the track and only having a one-stop strategy. So obviously, for those folks that are on a one-stop strategy, then it'll be good. But even if you're on a two-stop, it's also good depending on where you stop for that final set of tires, because at the end of the race, let's say let's say Charles Leclerc doesn't go to stop, and it's obvious that Sergio Perez is, then at some point Perez is going to be 18, 19 seconds behind Charles Leclerc if Leclerc decides to do a one-stopper, so he's not coming back in for tyres. But remember, he's going to lose about 1 to 1.5 seconds on Perez later in the race when Perez is on the good tyres. So the good tyres versus the worn tyres is about a 1 to 1.5 seconds. Now the problem that you've got to look out for if you're Perez is when he comes in for tyres, he's going to come back in around that 10th or 11th position. So he's got to pass a bunch of cars in front, and oh, by the way, a couple of those cars is Lewis Hamilton, whose troubles seem to have gone away right now, and of course George Russell and Carlos Sainz. That's before he gets to Charles Leclerc. So he's got to hope that he can get by those guys without being held up by any one of them, because all it'll take is 1 or 2 laps of being held up. In other words, he gets stuck behind them because he can't get past them, or he's fighting position. He gets past them and then he gets overtaken again, because that's what DRS does. Depending on where you choose to pass the car, if you pass it too early, then the other guy can take DRS and pass you again, and then it can go backwards and forwards like that. You've heard me talk in the past about what we call a DRS train, where you get all of these guys lined up against each other and they're all using DRS, so they're all going the same speed, and they just get stuck in a position where they can't move from. So anyway, let's hope Leclerc is on a 2-tyre strategy, and Red Bull can close out this year with a 1-2 in the World Championships. At the bottom end of the pack, we've got Alex Albon, who has moved up now to 15th position. He was all the way down, I think, in 17th or 18th at the beginning of the race. So he's having himself another good drive for Williams. And Nicholas Latifi, of course, is at the bottom. But we've got Mick Schumacher also struggling away there at the bottom of the pack as well. And also followed by Danny Ricciardo. For whatever reason, Danny Ricciardo, I guess when he came out for tyres, they didn't get warmed up fast enough, and he's stuck down in the 18th position right now. So again, not a lot going on at the front of the race, but lots going on in the middle. Sebastian Vettel is now being passed by the guys with the better tyres. And in fact, he's just come on the radio and said, you know, I'm out here like a sitting duck. Everybody's coming past me. And of course, his team's telling him, listen, when you get the tires later on in the race, you'll be passing everybody else. So anyway, we'll let the race unfold and see what happens. It's really interesting that Sebastian Vettel's in the very last race of his career, and all he can think about is getting up into positions and passing and getting up and making points and things like that. So it's the competitive spirit, I guess, will just never leave these guys. So we're going into lap 35, and Sergio Perez has just come in pitting for his second stop. So that means he's got 24 laps to make up about 19 to 20 seconds. So it's going to take a lap or two for the tires to warm up. So it's going to be a very, very tough battle for him to make it if Charles Leclerc decides to stay out. Now, where they are on those medium compound tires, they can stay out there. In fact, they would have to stay out there if they're going to do a two-stop until about lap 45 to 46, because those soft compound tires can't do more than about 10-12 laps on this surface at the Abu Dhabi racetrack at these temperatures. So this is going to be a cat and mouse game now going on for the rest of the race with these guys. But looking at this right now, I would say Sergio Perez is going to have a really, really tough time catching up, especially because he's got to get past Hamilton, he's got to get past Russell, he's got to get past Sainz and Norris and Vettel. So he's got a lot of guys he's got to get past here in the closing stages of the race. Oh, we've just had a yellow flag come out, and let's see what's going on. Oh, It's Nicholas Latifi. He was the guy that caused all the problems last year, and Mick Schumacher. So now we're finding out why Haas decided they didn't want to get. But it looks like, yeah, they are. Both of them are able to carry on. Schumacher looks like no damage to his car at all. Nicholas Latifi's got a left rear tyre that's going down, and so he's going to have to make it round to the pit lane and get a new set of tyres. But Mick Schumacher looks like he's in good shape. And just watching the replay here, it looks like Schumacher was coming up on Latifi, and Latifi either braked too hard or he slowed up much faster than Schumacher thought, and Schumacher just clipped the back of his left rear wheel as they've gone into the turn there, and they spun each other around. But that's really, when you see the replay and you see how fast he comes up on Latifi, you got to think, why was Latifi going so slow? But also Mick tried to thread the needle there, and the space just wasn't big enough for him to get through. So that's on Mick Schumacher, that one, and not Latifi. But it's interesting that Latifi's involved in another altercation at this racetrack. If you remember last year, it was his spin out and crash with about 6-7 laps to go. That ended up with the result being that Verstappen made a quick tyre change and was able to overtake Lewis Hamilton on the last lap to grab the World Championship. So anyway, the back racing, Latifi's, while I've been talking, Latifi's into the pits and he's out again, and so it's going to, the excitement now is really going to be can Sergio Perez make up the time and take over second place from Charles Leclerc? Okay, with about 5 laps to go, it looks like Perez has got to fight, because he's 4.5 seconds behind, and he did have a tough time getting past Lewis Hamilton just a couple of laps ago, and so he could not make those 1 to 2 seconds up during those laps. He was only able to gain 1/3 of a second on one of the laps and a little over 1/2 a second on the other. So that you add those two together, he probably lost a full second fighting to get past. Well, now it looks like Lewis Hamilton is going to, he's complaining that he has no power. His transmission, he's stuck in 7th gear. He can't get his car out of 7th gear. Of course, 1 gear is no good. Now they're saying he's managed to get it down to 5th, but okay, so he's going to box. He's going to drop out of the race, which is sad. That's probably and in fact, they've just mentioned it is the first time that Mercedes has had a mechanical issue that's forced them out of the race this year. So that's kind of a sad finish for Lewis Hamilton's year. He's just got off and he's into the pits now, and they're going to back that car into the garage. He is done for the day. They're talking about a hydraulic issue for the transmission, where it wouldn't let them change gears. These new shift-by-wire transmissions are great until something goes wrong. In the old days, when you had a real transmission, 7th gear is no good. That's okay. I've still got another 5 or 6 that I can use. Whereas once these fly-by-wire paddle shifting transmissions get a problem, it's a problem, and it does not go away, and there's no workaround. So we're coming up to 2 laps left to go, and I'm going to predict that Sergio Perez is not going to catch Charles Leclerc. Obviously, Leclerc did not come in. They talked about it, but did not come in for a 2-stop. He's still on that same set of tires. Max Verstappen is on the same set of tires. George Russell did come in for a 2-stop, and so did Hamilton. But they're not making any inroad to go. So it looks like the race is going to end this way. Max Verstappen is going to win his 15th race of the season, and Sergio Perez is going to come in third, and Charles Leclerc will come in second. So Sergio Perez and Red Bull missed the 1-2 by 1 point. So the other good news for Ferrari is that they take second place in the Constructors' Championship, holding off Mercedes for that. So a great year for Red Bull, a not so bad year for Ferrari at the end there, and a much improved year for Mercedes as they finished out these last 3-4 races in a really competitive position. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things go next year. Until next week, when we will continue to have these podcasts, even though there are no races. I want to thank our sponsor for this section, Phenology. Folks, as you've heard me say, these cars spit out a tremendous amount of data, and of course the only place to store data is in a data center. Phenology is a privately owned data center in Austin, Texas. It has both a public and a private cloud, and of course co-location services. So if you've got need to store your websites, build your websites, do some engineering work, or whatever you need to manipulate data and change data, store data, or even store your servers, your own servers for data, please think of Phenology. That is Phenology.com. Again, that's Phenology.com. And as we finish out this week, of course, we want to thank Andre Kuhn, our producer and technical guru, for all the great work that he does. And until then, next week, we will say goodbye for today. And next week, we're going to try and line up an interview. I'm not going to say who it is right now in case we can't get it done, but I think we can. So we're going to have an interview with a driver, an old driver, and well, maybe not that old, but older. Let's just say older driver. And of course, we'll have a history section to start. So until next week, this is Jonathan Steele with the Formula One News Hour. Have a great week. And finally, before we say goodbye, everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Spend time with your families. And if you have to drive somewhere, please drive carefully.